For Unit 3, Part 2, Day 6 notes, this is pretty much how do you write equation in point-slope form. And then we will also be getting into how do you transform from point-slope form to other forms that we've talked about in Part 1 of Unit 3. So the first example, write an equation in point-slope form. A line passes through the point 3, -8. It has a slope of 2. What is an equation of this line in point-slope form? So first of all, we should know that if you have a point and a slope, that these all represent variables. So my slope is an m, okay? My point represents x and y. But if you remember, point-slope form has these little ones in it on the x and the y, and that's your known point. So this is my known point. I know that this point is on my line. And I also know that I have a slope of 2. So I can take these three numbers and I can plug it directly into that equation. So I'm going to write that equation above my answer line here. And we're going to plug in. So I've got y minus y1. Well, y1 is a -8. Then I have equals m. M is 2. Parentheses, x minus x1. X1 was 3. So the only last thing I have to do is I got to make sure I do not have a double negative. So here, I've got two negatives. I can make that into a plus sign. Here I only had one minus sign, so I would leave it. So this is my equation of this line in point-slope form. Now, in Part B, it says write an equation of the line below in point-slope form. So you can see in this particular graph, this line does not cross the y-axis. Eventually, it would cross the y-axis, okay? But we don't know exactly where at this moment. So I can write an equation, a linear equation in point-slope form, if I know my slope and I know my point, okay? So, slope. Pretty easy. Go from the most left point to the most right point. How do I get there? I go up 2. I run 2. Okay, so 2 over 2. That would divide to be a 1. So my slope is 1. Now, for the point, you can pick either point. It doesn't matter which point you pick. I will always use the most right point if they're all positives. Okay, now if I look at these 2 points, they're in this quadrant, which is quadrant 2. There's going to be a negative, there's going to be a positive. I can't avoid that. So it doesn't matter what point I pick, but just because for the easiness of this, we're going to go with the most right point. So how do I get here from 0, 0? I go over 2, so that's a -2, and I go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So here is my x1 and my y1. Here is my slope. Can you plug it in to this formula? So let's give you about 15 seconds to get a head start before me. So go ahead and try to plug it in. Alright, so hopefully you have y minus y1 is 4. My slope was 1. And then I have x minus x1. x1 was a -2. I check for double negatives, make that into a positive, and then I am done. Okay. In example 2, it says you're going to transform the equation into slope-intercept form and then into standard form. Okay, so let's recap real quickly what standard form and slope-intercept form look like. Let me grab a card here. So we know that slope-intercept form looks like this. Okay? Standard form was what I called the cover-up method, when you would like cover up one part to get X and you cover up the other part to get Y. It was obviously easier when numbers were put into these places for ABC. But SIF, slope-intercept form, and this is standard form SF. Alright, so how do we do this? Well, first thing is that we want to distribute. Okay? So, I would distribute my 3, and I would have Y minus 1 equals 3 times X. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. I would add 1 to both sides. And I would have Y equals 3X. And then negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. Okay, now I have to go from SIF to SF. So I want X and Y on the same side. Okay? Remember that AX plus BY equals C. So I need this X to go over here in front of Y. So what do? I would subtract it. It's the opposite. So if I move this over, I get negative 3X. The Y has nothing in front of it, so that's a positive Y, equals negative 5. Please remember your signs here. So negative minus 5. So I would put that here. Okay, now let's try one with a fraction. So for part B, again, we're going to distribute. So Y minus 7 equals 1/2 times X. And then 1/2 times 6 is taking half of 6. What is half of 6? 3. Now, to get the Y by itself, I add the 7 over to 3. And I have Y equals 1/2 X plus 10. Alright, now, this is a great example to have because we are not allowed to have a fraction as a coefficient, meaning a number in front of my variable. It cannot be a fraction. It has to be a whole number. So, one of the very first things we learned in Unit 1 was how to clear a fraction. We're going to do that here. So I look at my denominator. That's a 2. I multiply everything by 2. So now I have 2Y. These 2's cancel, and I have 1X plus 20. Now, normally I would just draw a line here canceling my 2's, but this is an answer line right here. So this Y equals 1/2 X plus 10, that answers slope-intercept form. So now, to go to SF, how do I transform this? Well, I got to get this X in front here. So I'm going to go minus 1X, and I'm going to have minus 1X plus 2Y equals that positive 20. So now I have my standard form. I don't have any fractions. I have all whole numbers in front of my variables. And I have the correct form.